Throughout the night, the Russians terrorized us with drones and missiles which were launched in large numbers and in waves. Once again, Kiev and the region became one of the main targets of the enemy. The terrorists targeted several thermal power plants at once. By morning, according to the city authorities, more than 5,500 apartment buildings were left without heat. This is about half of Kiev's housing stock. Social infrastructure facilities began switching to autonomous mode. Power supply. It was also necessary to change the schedule of trains in the subway. Videos appeared on social media showing crowds of people. After the air raid alert was lifted, people waited for transport at stops to get to work. However, by midday, the subway had returned to its normal operating schedule. At present, heat has already been restored to 1,600 homes. The situation with water supply remains difficult. The right bank of Kiev is operating at reduced pressure, while the left bank is temporarily without water. Almost 3,500 buildings. Several districts were affected by Russian strikes at once. The capital's hospitals have been disconnected from the central power supply. They switched to autonomous power today at 2 in the morning at the start of the nighttime air raid alert. Currently, the capital's medical facilities are operating in emergency mode. This means that inpatient departments are not accepting scheduled patients and are focused only on emergency cases and those in intensive care. 70% of Kiev's hospitals are fully autonomous, meaning they have their own boiler rooms, wells, and generators. The capital is considering the scenario of a complete blackout lasting several days. Under these conditions, the autonomous hospitals, of which there are more than a dozen, will be reinforced with surgical and trauma teams who will work on urgent cases. In the event of a prolonged blackout, the medical sector will temporarily forgo electronic referrals and prescriptions. In case of a prolonged absence of electricity, communication, or internet. In Kiev, 6 pharmacies will operate around the clock to provide patients with psychotropic drugs, painkillers, and insulin, as well as other vital medications.
Medical care will be provided without interruption, but it's important to understand that planned medical care and scheduled procedures will definitely be postponed, and the priority in triage will be given to emergency and urgent medical care. In the event of mass admissions, all reserves and resources in hospitals are fully concentrated on providing emergency medical care.
The radiators have cracked and there's ice on the inside of the windows. Residents have already forgotten what hot water is. These are the conditions people are living in at one of the apartment buildings on the left bank of the Dnipro in the capital. Although it's not an old building, it's just a little over 20 years old. The heating company claims that it supplies heat to the building, but no one can say where 30 to 50 degrees of heat disappears to. TSN correspondent Dmytro Furdak spoke with the distressed residents.
The residents of the building in Kiev's Darnitsia district greet the TSN film crew as their last hope for help. The video showing a burst radiator in the stairwell flooding the floor has spread across the internet. And indeed, we can see that some of the radiators have been cut off by utility workers, while others have huge cracks. Houseplants have frozen in the stairwell and cracked plaster is everywhere.
These are the consequences of the attacks. Everything falls apart when missiles fly over us.
Miss Larissa greets us wearing only layers of clothing. The woman has diabetes and her husband suffers from Parkinson's disease. The pensioner has hardly left her home for 3 years now. She can't even get to the doctor.
My legs are sick and the elevator doesn't work.
The room thermometer in the woman's apartment shows 10 degrees Celsius. And that's even though the power was only turned off an hour ago. Before that, it was at least possible to heat the place somehow. The woman's friend is also suffering from the cold. Her Yorkshire Terrier, Lialka.
It's cold. She's also dressed in all sorts of clothes. In this warmer one. We're hiding all the time.
On the upper floors, we see a truly astonishing sight. Even though it's just above freezing in the apartment, the windows, there's ice on the inside.
It's like an installation on the windows. Our windows are freezing over and the radiators aren't heating at all. It's just frost ice and there's a small child. You can't stay in the house, so I cover myself with a blanket because the radiators are cold.
The residents of the building say they understand that the main reason for the prolonged power outages is the massive, relentless Russian attacks on energy infrastructure. What upsets people the most is that the heat doesn't come on even when there is electricity.
It's just a nightmare, and we no longer know where to turn for help. Just a nightmare.
While we're filming, another air raid siren goes off. Attention, air raid alert!
We kindly ask that you please proceed immediately to the nearest available emergency shelter.
By the way, the nearest shelter is right here under the building. At first glance, it even looks decent with a fresh renovation. But you can see cracks in the walls and there's no heating at all, so you can only last here for about half an hour.
It's cold, we have kids, and on top of that my wife is disabled. They also let people in wheelchairs in here. And it seems she caught pneumonia and purulent meningitis here.
People are showing TSN the complaints they submitted to the local authorities and the municipal office. A special commission did not find any problems.
No violations were found. Everything is satisfactory. Here, the incoming temperature is 70 degrees.
Residents of Darnitsia share some news with us. On Sunday evening, a new object appeared near the building, a generator. However, the utility workers couldn't connect it right away. We head to the office that manages the building. Residents are only received for 2 hours a week. They are clearly not happy to see us there. However, the head of the institution makes a promise. The company brought the generator. Today we will connect it. We couldn't do it yesterday, but we'll start the heating. It's only designed for heating. By Monday evening, work near the generator had begun. But after another strike on the energy sector during the night before Tuesday, locals say that heating disappeared even in those apartments where there was at least a minimal amount. Dnipro Frodak, Alexander Lefanov, and SN1+1.
The Chernobyl nuclear power plant lost all external power supply after today's Russian attack. This was stated by the IAEA. Representatives of the International Atomic Energy Agency also reported that during the shelling, power lines to other nuclear power plants were damaged. The Director General of the IAEA stated that several Ukrainian electrical substations, which are vital for nuclear safety, were affected by the large-scale Russian attack. Only in the evening was it possible to restore power to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, according to the Ministry of Energy. Earlier, Ukraine's defense intelligence warned that Russia would attempt to disconnect nuclear power plants from Ukraine's power grid. By doing so, the aggressor country would leave Ukrainian civilians without electricity and heat during the freezing weather. He chooses Ukraine over the Energy Forum. President Zelensky shared whether he would go to Davos. According to the head of state, the current priority is energy. He has already held meetings with the energy headquarters, both online and offline, and for now he remains in place. However, Volodymyr Zelensky noted that everything could change at any moment. If the documents regarding security guarantees and the reconstruction of our country are ready, then the trip will take place. Earlier, the publication Politico wrote that negotiations between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump have not yet been scheduled. The White House is expressing reluctance to organize the meeting. However, the president of Ukraine, on the contrary, considers a personal meeting with his American counterpart to be beneficial. Experts are calling Wednesday the key day for negotiations about our country because it is tomorrow that Trump will meet with representatives of the coalition of the willing, who are expected to ask the U.S. president to approve security guarantees for post-war Ukraine.
If there are packages, energy-related, or even a meeting and a decision on additional air defense, I will definitely go. But for now, I have a challenge here in Ukraine. We'll see. For now, I'm staying here.
The massive strike on Ukraine's energy sector is a signal, a warning for world leaders. He addressed the politicians and businessmen who have now gathered in Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. The minister noted that after the Russian strike, thousands of homes in Kyiv alone were left without heating in the freezing cold. Russia also damaged energy infrastructure in Vinnytsia, Dnipro, Odessa, Zaporizhzhia, Poltava, Sumy, and other regions. Sanctions pressure on Russia and support for the Ukrainian people with air defense systems, interceptors, and energy equipment are urgent, the foreign minister concluded. Meanwhile, 4 medium-capacity emergency generators will soon be delivered from Switzerland. And Moldova recently provided 14 generators for the Sumy region. Against the backdrop of Russian energy terror, Andriy Zebiga summarized the assistance received. In January, Italy began supplying industrial boilers for heating systems, and Belgium provided 22 mobile boilers. In addition, 3 generators with a capacity of 240 kilowatts each were delivered for Kiev, Odessa, and Fastiv. Assistance is also coming from the Czech Republic, Romania, Croatia, Bulgaria, Georgia, Lithuania, and Poland. And certain partner countries, in particular Norway, Germany, Austria, and the United Kingdom, focused their support in January on purchasing equipment, machinery, and resources to stabilize the operation of the energy system. And I am also helping you get through the cold. How are you coping in high-rise buildings? Are you using the points of invincibility? Let us know in the comments under this broadcast on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, I continue with the broadcast. Broadcasting from the Sports Network. 2 women have been wounded. The Russians once again targeted civilian infrastructure and the energy sector. A major boiler house in Dnipro has stopped working. 90 apartment buildings, 10 schools, and 2 hospitals have been left without heating. Meanwhile, in Pavlograd, many districts are experiencing power outages. Energy workers are repairing the networks. 4 people were wounded in Druzhkivka. The Russians dropped 6 aerial bombs on the city. Among the victims is a married couple who were driving their car at the moment of the attack. They suffered blast injuries and shrapnel wounds. 2 more men were injured. All of them were hospitalized. 1 person was wounded in the Kharkiv region. The man was making deliveries. He was delivering bread when the Russians struck the village of Oskil. The occupiers also attacked a farming enterprise in the Zolokiv community. Civilian buildings and cars were hit in Ivashki, Slodobivka, and Merefa. And in the Sami region, enemy aircraft launched another attack on Bilopilia this morning, right in the city center. The Russians dropped 4 guided aerial bombs. Residential buildings and infrastructure were shattered, cars caught fire, and numerous blazes broke out. Additionally, one of the gas pipelines was damaged. As a result, 250 homes were left without gas. Hundreds of people are lining up to donate blood. In Dnipro, from early morning, concerned citizens gathered in response to the call from the hospital that treats the most severely wounded. Since the beginning of the war, 23 tons of blood have been transfused here alone. And the daily need is only increasing. TSN correspondent Olha Pavlovska saw who responded to the hospital's call.
Lines of concerned people fill the corridors. Since morning, hundreds of people have been donating blood.
Squeeze it firmly and squeeze it very tightly. Hold on.
That's it. I'm absolutely willing to endure it for a good cause, says student Victoria.
Of course, I hope it will save someone's life.
Donor blood. It is this blood that is now saving the life of 35-year-old Vyacheslav in the intensive care unit. He has already received 3 liters of blood after suffering a severe injury. He was brought to Dnipro from the Pokrovska direction.
I had just changed shifts and lay down to sleep. I woke up from terrible pain. I flew into the sleeping bag in the dugout. I tore the sleeping bag open on myself and reached my hand to my leg. There was a pool of blood. My comrades carried me out when the dugout started to burn.
Blood cannot be replaced by any medicine, the doctors in the intensive care unit explain. Here, they save the most severely wounded, both military and civilians.
On average, from 3 to 5 liters of blood products are needed for 1 course of treatment. There are cases when a single patient needs 10 or even 12 liters.
To build up reserves, the hospital announced a donor day. For convenience, they set up a special operating room and a fast registration process here.
My contribution is my blood. That's all I can do right now. But it's very important to me to help someone, even if it's just in this way.
First and foremost, it's about supporting our brave defenders and helping in any way that I can.
A lot of people of different ages came to donate blood, including students and doctors who save the sick and wounded every day.
We're doing everything we can. The more, the better. I donate every 6 months. As a doctor, I see that every drop of blood is worth its weight in gold.
In this hospital alone, since the start of the war, 23 tons of donor blood have already been transfused. After the full-scale invasion, the need increased several times over.
Blood is being transfused constantly, around the clock, without stopping. We have a diamond, an example of such resilience. A guy who received 12 liters of blood transfusions, and now he helps all the wounded heroes recover and look to the future.
Ms. Veronica dared to donate blood for the first time in her life. She says she will now encourage all her acquaintances not to be afraid.
It's all simple, not difficult. That's why I recommend to people who haven't donated yet to come and donate. I think it's good. We need to help people.
Medical professionals urge people to donate blood regularly because the need never goes away. To save the wounded and the sick all across the country. Olga Pavlovska, Alexander Kulich, Dnipro TSN 1+1.
According to Yulia Tymoshenko, almost half of the bail set by the court had already been paid this morning. The deadline expires on Wednesday. This is reported by the publication Ukrainska Pravda with reference to its own sources. Journalists received information that as of Tuesday morning, more than 13.5 million hryvnias had been paid. This portion of the bail was paid by two people connected to one of Batkivshchina's main sponsors, MP Kostiantin Bondarev. The High Anti-Corruption Court set bail for Tymoshenko in the amount of over 33 million hryvnias as a preventive measure. The deputy is suspected of bribing members of parliament to influence the results of voting in the Verkhovna Rada. If the bail is not paid by Thursday, the prosecution will have grounds to request a stricter preventive measure for her. Tymoshenko appeared in court today wearing a black mask and complained about a sudden illness that prevented her from finding out who paid almost half of the required amount for her.
We are doing everything possible so that everything, even if not completely illegal, is matched with the main weapon. I mean, all the teams.
So is there a chance that the court itself will actually be allowed to compare?
Honestly, at this moment, I don't know. You don't.
It is important for you to understand, Ani, and recognize that...
Today, the main weapon was compared. Honestly, today, the main weapon was made. It's just that yesterday, I got very sick. Yesterday, I had a fever of over 40 degrees.
It was truly the very first time in my entire life that I had experienced this, so I might have potentially missed some important details. Donald Trump, having successfully managed to suspend some ongoing international conflicts, is at the same exact time threatening to start entirely new ones himself. This complex situation remains quite unpredictable for everyone involved. He still hasn't ended the war in Ukraine, but what is it that Americans actually respect him for? TSN's own correspondent in the USA, Olha Koshelenko, compared the promises Trump made when he entered the White House with what has actually been accomplished.
A year ago, just like today, it was extremely cold in Washington. Because of this, Donald Trump's inauguration was moved from the street to inside the Capitol building. And this, perhaps, is the only thing that connects January 20th then and now. In every other respect, the United States has become a new country. In his inaugural speech, Trump proclaimed a new golden age for America. At first, it was the Oval Office that shone with gold. Moldings and statuettes made of precious metal adorned the walls and fireplace of the president's workspace. But the well-being of ordinary Americans was attempted to be improved at the expense of trade tariffs. An additional fee for the right to trade with the United States was introduced for almost all trading partners. The percentages for each country, the president repeatedly adjusted them manually, using them as a tool of pressure in negotiations. The logic here is not only economic but also political. For example, new tariffs. Trump recently imposed them on European partners who are resisting his plans to take control of Greenland. As punishment for disobedience. Our success will be measured by the wars we do not enter, Trump declared at the beginning of 2025. A year later, his record included support for Israel in the war against Gaza, the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities, the abduction of Venezuelan dictator Maduro, and open claims on Greenland, which belongs to Denmark. Trump managed to achieve a halt to hostilities in Gaza and the return of all Israeli hostages. But the American administration only gets involved in those conflicts where it sees the possibility of a quick victory. To the people of Iran, who were protesting against the authoritarian regime of the Ayatollahs in street demonstrations, Trump initially personally promised, saying, "Hold on, American help is on the way." He even called for a change of power, something none of the previous American presidents had ever done. But then he suddenly changed his mind. The Iranian protests were drowned in blood. People don't even mention anymore Trump's promise to bring peace to Ukraine in 24 hours. He himself now regularly repeats, "Who could have thought that Russia's war against Ukraine would turn out to be so lawless?" The most difficult task. In fact, aside from him, no one considered it easy. No one thought this matter was easy. Trump tried to put pressure on Zelenskyy. The scandal in the Oval Office went down in history as the first case of a public quarrel at the highest level. He organized a warm welcome for Putin in Alaska, which ended up amounting to nothing. So for a while, the roles reversed and Ukraine became the country that was heroically moving toward victory, while Putin became a paper tiger. He held a summit with European leaders, after which he announced that the war should be frozen along the line of contact. But soon after, he once again began demanding that Ukraine hand over its territories to Putin. Within a year, everyone got used to the fact that the negotiating table could be flipped over and over again. Importantly, the United States continues to provide Ukraine with intelligence and sell it weapons. They are also negotiating security guarantees and post-war reconstruction. But when these agreements might actually be needed remains unknown. The law of the strong has become the official American strategy. We do it because we want to and we can, without wasting resources on hiding our true intentions. A vivid embodiment of how Trump envisions the new architecture of global security was his project for the Peace Council for Gaza. It was called an alternative to the UN. Anyone can join, but to become a permanent member, you need to contribute $1 billion in cash. Even Putin and Lukashenko received invitations. Naturally, Trump himself will preside over it. He will also have the final say in approving decisions. Even the leaders of the most influential countries can no longer count on any conventions, such as diplomatic etiquette or basic human courtesy. For example, neighboring Canada, Trump campaigned for it to become the 51st state and publicly took offense at its Prime Minister Carney over a political ad. Norway's Prime Minister Støre wrote an offended letter saying that he was no longer obliged to care about peace because the Nobel Committee, which Støre has nothing to do with, did not award him the Peace Prize. But are Americans actually satisfied within their own country, according to polls? With the new migration policy, Trump closed the border to illegal immigrants from Mexico and restricted the issuance of migration visas to troubled countries. At the same time, ICE, the immigration police, became a real nightmare on city streets. Thousands of people who had already obtained citizenship or were on their way to it are being arrested and sent to immigration detention centers. Recently, America was shaken by the murder of Renee Good, who was born in the USA and was shot in her car by an ICE officer for disobedience. But these protests did not become nationwide. In just 1 year of his second term, Donald Trump dared to do many things he hadn't attempted during his first. And the clearest illustration of just how radical his actions could be was in fact the White House, both historically and politically, the heart of the states. The president officially issued a formal order for the comprehensive and total destruction of the building's east wing, in order to construct a magnificent new ballroom there. And the reconstruction is currently and actively in progress.
Now let's return to the capital of Ukraine. The state of emergency has been declared here. The Russians are not giving up their attempts to bomb the energy infrastructure completely. Utility workers, like energy workers, are trying to fix the situation despite the freezing temperatures. At the same time, unexpected utility disasters are also happening. For a whole week, a high-rise in Pechersk was flooded with boiling water. As a result, the parking lot there turned into a waterfall, an ice rink, and partly a sauna, says our Alexander Romanyuk, who visited the site.
Water is pouring from the ceiling, and nearby, a representative of Japanese car manufacturing has its wheel and bumper frozen to the parking floor. You see, everything here is flooded, and further on are the elevators that people were supposed to use, but unfortunately they can't do that now because the elevators are frozen. The excursion to the elevator turns out to be quite extreme. You see, I almost fell. It happened.
They haven't been working for a week already, because everything could short-circuit.
Yes, you heard right. This pool in the parking lot of the building on Lesya Ukrainka Boulevard has been here for a week now, and it doesn't stop at the -4th floor.
This is the least affected floor, but there was nothing like this at all when we started calling and asking for it all to stop.
We continue walking down past the small shimmering puddle to see a magnificent full-size professional ice rink.
There's ice there. Careful. Be careful.
The entire entrance down to the -6th floor of the parking lot is covered in ice. Driving here has long been prohibited, cars aren't allowed in, and even walking through is no easy task. The price is set at the exit. From Zelenskyy, it doesn't matter who says it. Even the camera is stunned by what it sees. TSN loses focus. But the icy floor of the parking lot isn't the most impressive thing here. In this picture, the residents sigh. Because while the upper floors, at a time when the capital is partly without heat and hot water, have been flooded with boiling water for 7 days, well, you saw what extremes there are. Ice below, and here, hot water. Now let's go upstairs. It's even worse there. Show us what it all looks like from the outside. Through the hot steam, the residents lead us to the spot where, since January 13th, boiling water has been flooding the parking lot. We don't risk stepping into the hot pool, but the sound of the water alone tells you how powerful the flow is. You understand, right? It's a water abyss. It's just steam, 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 steam. And up above, there's a forest. Paradoxically, the residents explain the water isn't coming from their building. Like most Kiev residents, they don't have hot water, and the heating is only turned on at certain times. They assume the boiling water is coming from the storm drains where it ended up after the heating main burst.
The heating main is somewhere in the middle of the boulevard and it's all flowing over here.
As soon as the accident happened, the residents of the building started calling the utility services. But each service just gives their own version, and none of them take responsibility. Kyiv Teploenergo responded that they had no pipe bursts. Kyiv Vodokanal insisted the water wasn't theirs either, yet the boiling water kept pouring out.
We're afraid that our building and the neighboring one, which is probably on the same pipeline as us, will sink into the ground.
The boiling water stopped leaking only last night because the utility workers finally started fixing the damage near the building of the heat carrier. Kyiv Teploenergo and the State Emergency Service confirmed that it was caused by the shelling, which put additional stress on the pipes. They promised to finish the repairs quickly, but at the same time they do not acknowledge the residents' accusations. They claim that at the moment they cannot confirm that it was water from this particular pipe that flooded the building. They say this will require time and additional examinations. The residents in turn are calling on the city to finally respond and help eliminate the consequences. We
can't dry anything or do anything because we only have electricity for a few hours and only at night. We can't even do anything on our own.
They say that after 4 years of war, they've learned to cope with the problems caused by Russia. But they definitely won't put up with the negligence caused by their own people.